The New Beginning. In the heart of the galaxy, on a planet known as Archaea, humanity stood on the edge of something profound, something uncertain. The human race, having fought battles, lost friends, and triumphed in ways unimaginable to the alien races around them, was now tasked with something entirely different. Peace. Yet even the idea of peace seemed foreign to many. For Sarah, it felt like the universe itself was pushing her into a role she never wanted. Standing in front of the Academy's massive crystal doors, Sarah could feel her heart beat faster than usual, its rhythm betraying the calm facade she worked so hard to maintain. The doors were majestic, towering over her in their grandeur. They glistened under the light of 3 setting suns, reflecting the glory of a civilization far beyond what humanity had achieved. Her simple gray tunic, which had once been worn with pride on countless battlefields, now felt out of place. The pendant around her neck, a small silver piece that once symbolized command, now seemed to weigh heavier than any weapon she had ever carried. The Academy hallways hummed with life as alien students of all shapes and sizes moved around her. Some floated, others crawled, and many walked on multiple legs, displaying biological traits that Sarah had never seen before. The hall seemed alive with energy, alien species from across the galaxy, coming together to study, to grow, to understand one another. But to Sarah, it was a battlefield, only a different kind. Here, her past was a weapon, and her every move was a potential spark to ignite something far more dangerous than she could control. Sarah made herself small, keeping her eyes lowered and her shoulders hunched as she walked through the bustling halls. It was a practice she had perfected over months, an act of survival. Blend in, be invisible. It was the only way to ensure she wouldn't be found, wouldn't be dragged into the spotlight of her past. Just as she moved past a small group of Archaean students, one of them, a bulky figure covered in shimmering blue scales, shoved her aside. The impact sent Sarah stumbling, and her books scattered across the polished floor with a dull thud. The alien didn't apologize. Instead, he sneered at her, his yellow eyes gleaming with contempt. "Watch where you're going, human," he growled in a deep, menacing voice. Sarah paused, steadying herself as she crouched to gather her books. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the impulse to act. Her military implants, long dormant, hummed faintly beneath her skin. She could feel the familiar tug of instinct urging her to strike, to defend herself. But she forced herself to stay calm. No one could know who she was. Not yet. Not here. The Archaean student, Rex, laughed cruelly as he watched her. His 2 companions, a scaly Proxim and a tentacled Meridian, snickered behind him, joining in his mockery. "You humans think you can just waltz into any academy and act like you belong," Rex sneered. "What makes you think you're even qualified to be here?" Sarah stayed silent, continuing to pick up her books, but inside, a storm was brewing. She could feel the weight of the pendant against her chest, a symbol of the battle-hardened leader she once was, now reduced to nothing more than a quiet student in a world that refused to see her as anything more. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke the words out of necessity, not because she was afraid, but because it was the only way to get through this without revealing herself. Her military implants, the ones that had once made her the most feared commander in the galaxy, were now a curse, forcing her to hide who she truly was. "That's right," Rex said with a malicious grin. "You should be sorry. You're nothing but a weak human pretending to fit in." But just as Rex stepped forward to make another cruel remark, a new voice interrupted the moment. A tall, purple-skinned Archaean girl with silver eyes stepped into the scene, her expression calm but determined. "Leave her alone, Rex," she said, her voice firm, but not aggressive. Rex stopped, eyeing the girl with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What's your problem, Uni?" he snapped. "This human needs to learn her place." Uni stepped forward, her forearms crossed. "The war ended 3 years ago, Rex. We're supposed to be better than this by now." Her silver eyes bore into him, unblinking and resolute. Rex's scaly skin darkened slightly, a sign of irritation among his species, but he said nothing more. With a final sneer at Sarah, he turned and walked away, his companions following suit. Sarah stood up, her heart still pounding, but the adrenaline slowly ebbing away as the confrontation ended. She glanced at Uni, who had stepped in to defend her, and nodded in quiet thanks. "I appreciate it," Sarah said, her voice soft but genuine. Uni smiled warmly, her silver eyes glowing slightly in the dim light of the hallway. "No problem. You shouldn't have to put up with that kind of treatment." She hesitated for a moment before adding, "I know it's not easy here, but you don't have to face it alone." Sarah felt a twinge of guilt. She wasn't here to make friends. She wasn't here to stand out. She was here to disappear. But there was something about Uni's kindness that made her want to trust her, even if it was dangerous. I don't know if I belong here," Sarah admitted, glancing down at the floor. Uni tilted her head, as if considering the words carefully. "None of us really know if we belong," she said softly. "We're all just trying to figure it out." Sarah gave a small, hesitant smile in return, her mind still spinning with thoughts of the past. As she walked alongside Uni to the cafeteria, the familiar weight of her pendant pulled at her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this place, this academy, might just be the fresh start she had been searching for. But even as she tried to push away the ghosts of her past, she knew one thing for sure: the peace she was seeking would never be easy. It would take time, patience, and most of all, courage. For Sarah, the courage to face who she truly was, and the courage to trust others again. Later that night, as Sarah sat alone in her dorm room, her thoughts turned inward. She stared at the small silver pendant that hung from her neck, the tiny symbol of her past life. With a soft click, it opened, revealing a tiny hologram projector. The image of her younger self appeared above the pendant, dressed in the uniform of the Ghost Division, her eyes fierce and resolute as she addressed a room full of soldiers. "Tomorrow, we strike at the heart of the Proxim fleet," her recorded voice rang out. "Their shields are unbreakable, but they're wrong. We'll end this war. Together." The image flickered out, leaving Sarah in the quiet darkness. She closed her eyes, remembering the weight of the decisions she had made in that life. But that was over now. She had chosen peace, chosen a different path, and she would never go back. But as the soft hum of her implants echoed under her skin, Sarah knew one thing for certain. The journey ahead would not be an easy one, and the world was watching, waiting to see who she would become. The test of strength. The following morning, the buzz of the academy seemed to hum with a different energy, as though the whole place was alive with possibilities and challenges. Sarah felt it as she stepped into the combat training center, the harsh lighting reflecting off the smooth, polished floors. The sound of students' footsteps echoed through the large space, a mixture of alien footfalls and human shoes, all moving in sync toward the area where their instructor waited. It wasn't just a class today. It was a rite of passage, and Sarah could feel the tension rising in the air around her. The academy had mandated that all first-year students, regardless of species, had to participate in basic self-defense training. But for Sarah, this wasn't just about learning to fight. It was about survival. She couldn't afford to let her past bleed into this new life. And yet, every part of her, every fiber of her being, longed to act, to prove she was capable of more than just blending in. "Pair up," the instructor's voice rang out over the room, commanding immediate attention. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she looked around, trying to make herself small, trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. But it was too late. "I want the human," a deep voice called out. Sarah's stomach dropped. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Rex. The same arrogant alien who had shoved her yesterday. The one who seemed determined to make her life difficult. His yellow eyes gleamed with challenge as he strode toward her. Behind him, his friends, a Proxim with razor-sharp claws, and a hulking Meridian whose tentacles twitched in anticipation, followed closely, a trio of bullies looking for their next prey. "Step up," Rex ordered, his voice laced with mockery. "Let's see what the weak little human can do." Sarah's hands clenched involuntarily at her sides, the pressure of keeping her composure overwhelming. She had been trained for combat her entire life. She had led battles, strategized entire campaigns, and faced enemies that could tear planets apart. But here, in this room filled with students, many of whom were far stronger and faster than she was, Sarah had to pretend. She had to pretend she was just another human, small, fragile, and weak. Her mind flashed to the day she had been forced to leave her position as a commander of the Ghost Division. The loss of her soldiers, the endless battles that had scared her and the galaxy. She had thought that stepping away from that life would bring her peace, that she could find redemption in education, in rebuilding. But now, with Rex standing before her, that choice felt increasingly like a dream slipping further away. "Rex, please," the instructor said hesitantly, stepping forward. "I think we should." "No," Rex interrupted with a defiant snarl. "I've been waiting for this moment." Sarah looked around the room, seeing that all eyes were on them. A crowd had gathered, watching the interaction with bated breath. Some students exchanged nervous glances, while others appeared almost excited by the spectacle. The idea of a human going up against one of their own kind, an Archean, was sure to be something they would talk about for days to come. Sarah knew there was no way out of this. She had to face Rex, and she had to do it in a way that wouldn't reveal who she truly was. It was a test, and Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The instructor sighed and stepped back, clearly unwilling to get involved. "Fine. You two, begin." Sarah steeled herself. Her body was tense, her mind calculating, but she stayed still. Rex lunged first, his fist cutting through the air with unnerving speed. It was a practice punch, but there was no mistaking the aggression behind it. He was trying to prove something, not just to her, but to the rest of the academy. Sarah shifted to the side just enough to let his fist miss by inches, the air crackling with the force of his swing. It was too fast. She could feel her implants flickering to life beneath her skin, a familiar, almost automatic reaction to physical threats. But she resisted the urge to retaliate, to counter in the way she had been trained. Instead, she stepped back, stumbling slightly as if to show she was uncoordinated, weak, just like they expected. Another punch came, and Sarah twisted her body just enough to absorb the impact on her shoulder, letting it push her back onto the mat. The impact wasn't enough to hurt her. Her body was conditioned to withstand much worse, but she made it look as though she had been overpowered. The room gasped, and Rex's laugh echoed above the murmurs of the students. "Pathetic," Rex sneered, stepping back to give her space to rise. His eyes were filled with contempt. "Is this all humans are? Weak, helpless creatures who can't even fight?" Sarah stood up slowly, brushing herself off, her movements deliberate. She kept her face neutral, but the anger simmering inside her was hard to suppress. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Sarah said quietly, just loud enough for Rex to hear. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Rex sneered at her, his arrogance radiating off him. "I'll show you what I can do. Get ready, human." He charged at her again, this time with full force, his fist glowing with unnatural energy from the combat enhancers he had secretly injected before class. But this time, Sarah was ready. She had no choice but to move faster, to act before Rex realized the full extent of what he had provoked. As his fist came toward her, Sarah's training took over. She sidestepped and grabbed his arm, using his momentum to twist him off balance, sending him crashing to the floor with a controlled, precise move. The room fell silent. Rex lay there for a moment, shocked, trying to process what had just happened. The others stared, wide-eyed, unsure of what to make of the situation. Sarah didn't stand over him, gloating. Instead, she stepped back, making herself look small again, as though the movement had been nothing more than a fluke. She didn't want to give him, or anyone, any reason to suspect that she was capable of much more. But it was clear that Rex was not pleased. His scales had darkened, a sign of frustration and anger. He got to his feet, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "You didn't win, human," he spat. "This isn't over. I'll make sure of it." Sarah simply nodded, her face impassive. "It's over for now," she said calmly, before turning and walking away. The lesson was over, and so was this fight. As Sarah left the training center, her heart was still pounding, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that she couldn't hide forever. Her implants, her military instincts, were too strong. She couldn't suppress them, and the longer she stayed at the academy, the harder it would be to keep up the facade of weakness. But for now, she had survived, and that was enough. The first revelation. The days following the combat training session were filled with a tense quiet, one that Sarah could almost feel physically pressing down on her. She had done what she thought was necessary, kept her head down, avoided trouble, and tried to blend in. But something was different now. The academy, once a place of potential new beginnings, had become a battleground of its own, and she was in the thick of it. Sarah couldn't escape the feeling that everyone was watching her, especially Rex. He had taken every opportunity to make her feel small, to remind her that no matter how much she tried to hide, he knew exactly who she was. At least he thought he did. The Archon had made it clear that he didn't trust humans, especially not after the war. And for reasons Sarah couldn't quite explain, she felt as though he knew there was something more to her than just the quiet, shy student from Earth. Every glance he threw her way seemed to carry with it a challenge, a dare to break her silence. It was almost as though he was waiting for her to reveal her true self. The days passed in a blur of classes and assignments. Sarah struggled to focus, her thoughts constantly drifting back to the war. She could still hear the sounds of explosions, the sharp whine of combat ships, the cries of her fallen soldiers. She had been the commander, the leader of the Ghost Division, humanity's most elite and feared unit, but that was all behind her now. She was no longer the warrior who commanded fleets. Now she was just a student, doing her best to escape the shadows of her past. But escape was becoming harder with every passing day. The encounter in the hallway. It was a week after the combat training incident when Sarah encountered Rex once again. She had just finished an engineering lecture, one of the few classes that truly captivated her mind. The professor was discussing the complexities of quantum systems, and Sarah found herself lost in the theories and equations, imagining what it would be like to build the kinds of machines that could change the course of human history. As she walked out of the lecture hall, deep in thought, she nearly bumped into Rex, who was standing near the entrance, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. His yellow eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "So the quiet little human thinks she's going to build something," Rex sneered, stepping into her path as she tried to move past. "Maybe you should leave the real work to those who actually know what they're doing." Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She knew exactly what he was doing, testing her, trying to provoke a reaction. He wanted to see if the human girl was weak or if she was hiding something more. "Why do you keep picking on me, Rex?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady, though her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What do you want?" Rex took a step closer, his towering figure looming over her. His scales shimmered under the harsh lights of the hallway. "What do I want?" He chuckled darkly. "I want to know who you really are. I know you're not just some ordinary human. You've got that look in your eyes. I've seen it before, the look of someone who's been through war, someone who knows how to fight. So tell me, little human, who are you really?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. His words cut through her like a blade, and for a moment she felt exposed, as if everything she had worked for was unraveling before her eyes. She had spent so long hiding, so long pretending to be someone she wasn't, that she hadn't realized how easily it could all come crashing down. But she couldn't let him see that weakness. She couldn't let him think he had won. I'm just a student, she said, her voice low but firm. Just like you. Rex snorted in disbelief. Don't lie to me. I know what I saw in combat training. You didn't fight like a student. You fought like a soldier. You're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She had to keep her cool. She couldn't let him, or anyone, discover who she truly was. The stakes were too high. Leave me alone, Rex, she said, stepping around him and continuing down the hallway. You don't know anything about me. Rex's voice followed her as she walked away. I'll find out eventually. You can't hide forever, human. The unexpected ally. The next day, as Sarah sat in the cafeteria with her tray of food, if it could even be called food, it seemed as though the entire room was watching her. It wasn't just Rex this time. There were whispers, sidelong glances, and occasional stares. The rumors about the fight in combat training had spread like wildfire through the academy, and Sarah knew it wouldn't be long before someone uncovered the truth about her. But just as she was about to retreat to a corner of the cafeteria, Uni appeared again. The tall, purple-skinned Archean girl walked over with a smile, her silver eyes glowing softly. Hey, mind if I sit? Uni asked, her voice friendly but cautious, as if she too was aware of the tension in the air. Sarah nodded, thankful for the distraction. Sure, I'm just trying to make sense of this mess. Uni smiled, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she understood more than Sarah had expected. You know, people are talking, she said softly, glancing around the room to make sure no one was listening too closely. About you. About the fight with Rex. Sarah sighed, pushing her food around her plate. I don't know why he keeps picking on me. I've tried to stay out of trouble, but it seems like he just won't leave me alone. Uni leaned in a little closer, her voice lower. It's not just that. I know what it's like to be underestimated, to be judged based on where you come from or what you've done. You're not the only one carrying the weight of your past. Sarah looked up, surprised. You've been through something like that. Uni nodded, her silver eyes distant for a moment as if lost in thought. My family's been through its own share of battles, but I've never been one to fight. I came here to build, to learn, not to carry the burden of war. But I know what it's like to have people think you're just another fighter, just another soldier. People forget that there's more to you than that. Sarah felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. For the first time since she arrived at the academy, she wasn't alone in her struggle. Uni understood. I just don't know how long I can keep this up, Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Uni placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. You don't have to do it alone. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. And if Rex gets too much for you, I've got your back. Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. She had spent so long pushing people away, keeping her walls high. But Uni's kindness, her willingness to stand by her, was something Sarah hadn't expected. Maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her here. A place where she didn't have to fight battles alone. The brewing storm. Later that night, as Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling of her small dorm room, she could feel the weight of the decisions she had made bearing down on her. She had come to the academy to escape her past, to start fresh, but now, it seemed like the ghosts of that past were catching up with her faster than she had anticipated. Rex wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth, and once he did, once he realized who she really was, there would be no going back. The question was, could she continue to hide, to live a lie? Or would she be forced to reveal the truth about who she was and what she had done? The war had been her legacy, but it was a legacy she was desperate to leave behind. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the stirrings of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to build something new here. Something better. But the path ahead was anything but clear, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The next challenge. The next few days felt like a constant game of survival for Sarah. Every interaction, every glance from her fellow students seemed to carry with it the weight of unspoken questions. Rex was relentless, his pursuit of discovering the truth about her growing more intense with each passing moment. Sarah could feel his eyes on her whenever she moved through the academy. It was as if he was waiting for the moment she would slip up, waiting for her to show who she truly was. But she couldn't afford to make that mistake. Her secret had to stay hidden. The quiet war in her mind raged on. Should she reveal herself? Should she expose the truth? The more Sarah thought about it, the more the idea seemed impossible. The consequences of revealing her past were too dangerous, not just for her, but for those around her. She had chosen peace for a reason. Revealing her true identity could unravel everything she had worked for. Yet, despite her best efforts to keep a low profile, Sarah found herself at the center of attention once again, this time in a way she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't Rex who caused the stir, but a class assignment that set the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. The assignment. In one of her engineering classes, the professor assigned a group project, something that was meant to help students collaborate and learn from one another. As the students were paired up, Sarah found herself assigned to work with none other than Rex. The moment she heard her name called in the same group as his, she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a test, and Rex would make sure it would be a challenge. He would do everything in his power to make her fail. As they gathered at the table to discuss the project, Rex's gaze didn't leave her for a second. "So, human," he said with a twisted smile. "Let's see if you can keep up with the rest of us." Sarah didn't rise to his bait. She kept her voice calm and steady, despite the adrenaline pumping in her veins. "We need to figure out how to create a self-sustaining energy system for the academy, something that could power the entire campus without relying on external resources. That's the assignment." Rex leaned back in his chair, clearly unimpressed. "Sounds easy. I'm sure you'll figure it out, since humans are so good with technology." He emphasized the word humans, dripping with sarcasm. The others in the group, 2 Archons and a Proxim, exchanged glances, but none of them dared to speak up. It was clear that Rex had already assumed the role of group leader, and no one wanted to challenge his authority. Not even Sarah. But Sarah wasn't about to back down. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her into failure. Not here. Not in front of everyone. "Let's focus," she said firmly. "We can come up with something. We'll need to integrate advanced quantum mechanics and thermodynamics. I have some experience with this. If we work together, we can do it." Rex raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "I'm not so sure," he muttered under his breath. "We'll see how this goes." As the group began to discuss ideas, Sarah found herself tapping into the military-grade intellect that had once made her one of the most feared commanders in the galaxy. It was in moments like this, when the odds were stacked against her, that she thrived. The feeling of strategic thinking, of finding a solution under pressure, was something she had missed. Her hands moved swiftly, sketching out the initial design for the energy system, explaining the flow of power through quantum circuits and how they could build a system using the resources available at the academy. To her surprise, Rex didn't interrupt. He seemed too focused on the drawings she was making, a look of concentration crossing his face. For the first time since meeting him, Sarah felt the faintest flicker of respect coming from him. But she couldn't let herself get distracted. She still had to keep her true self hidden. After the session ended, the group broke for lunch, but Sarah was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. The constant act of pretending, of holding back her true strength, was wearing on her. She knew it wouldn't be long before someone, perhaps Rex, would push her too far. And when that happened, the consequences would be dire. The tension builds. The following day, the tension between Sarah and Rex escalated. They continued to work together on the project, but Rex's behavior had become more erratic. He seemed to be deliberately trying to undermine her ideas, questioning her every move. The other members of the group were starting to notice, exchanging uncomfortable glances when Rex would make a snide remark. It was as if he wanted to push her to the edge. to get her to react, to reveal the truth. One afternoon, while working late in the lab, Rex confronted her once again. This time, there was no pretending. He had grown bolder. His posture was aggressive, his yellow eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Enough with the games," he said, his voice low but dangerous. "I know you're hiding something. I can see it in the way you think, the way you move. You're not like the other humans here. What are you really hiding?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. The moment when everything might fall apart. For a split second, she considered revealing the truth, letting him know who she really was. But no, she couldn't. Not yet. It would destroy everything she had worked for. "I'm just a student," she said quietly, her voice betraying none of the fear that gripped her insides. "Just like you." Rex didn't believe her. "I've seen how you fight, how you think. You're not fooling anyone, Sarah. I know what you are." Sarah stood up, her hands trembling as they rested on the workbench. "You don't know anything about me." But Rex wasn't done. "No," he said softly, almost to himself. "But I will." And just as quickly as the confrontation had begun, Rex turned and left the room, his footsteps echoing in the silence behind him. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do next. She had come so close to breaking, to revealing her true self, but she had held back, just barely. However, in the pit of her stomach, Sarah felt a deep sense of dread. Rex wasn't going to give up. He was closing in on her, and the more she tried to hide, the harder it would be to keep her secret. The unexpected help. Later that evening, as Sarah sat in her dorm room, grappling with the weight of the day's events, there was a soft knock on the door. She hesitated before standing up to answer it. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Uni standing there, her silver eyes warm and understanding. "Can I come in?" Uni asked gently. Sarah stepped aside to let her in, grateful for the distraction. She needed someone to talk to, someone who might understand. "Rex is getting worse," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. "He's getting too close to figuring out who I really am." Uni nodded, her expression serious. "I can tell. He's been watching you closely, but you don't have to do this alone, Sarah. I can help you." Sarah shook her head, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I don't want to drag you into this. You don't understand what's at stake." Uni placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Maybe I don't understand everything, but I know what it's like to feel like you have to carry the weight of the past. You don't have to carry it alone." Sarah felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she wasn't alone. She didn't have to face this battle by herself. "Thank you, Yumi," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, Sarah realized something important. No matter what happened next, she wasn't as alone as she had once believed. The revelation. The days following her conversation with Uni were filled with a quiet but palpable sense of change. Sarah had always considered herself a master of keeping her emotions in check, of hiding her true self behind a mask of indifference. But Uni's kindness, her willingness to stand by her, had started to chip away at that armor. For the first time in a long while, Sarah found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her here after all. But even as hope began to creep in, Sarah couldn't escape the growing sense of danger. Rex was getting closer. Every time they worked together on the project, every time their eyes met across the room, Sarah could feel the weight of his suspicion pressing down on her. He knew something was off. He could feel it, just like she could feel the constant pull of her past. The turning point. One afternoon, as Sarah was working late in the lab, trying to perfect the design for the energy system her group was building, the door opened, and Rex walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. The lab was supposed to be closed for the day. "Sarah," he said, his voice laced with something she couldn't quite place. "We need to talk." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this, but she wasn't ready for it. "Not yet. I'm busy," she said, her voice a little sharper than she intended. "If you need something, just ask your group. I'm sure they'll handle it." Rex took a step forward, his presence filling the small space of the lab. His yellow eyes were piercing, intense. "This isn't about the project," he said softly. "This is about you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She stood up from the workbench, her mind racing as she tried to figure out what he knew. "Look, I don't know what you think you know," Sarah began, keeping her tone as neutral as possible. "But I'm just a student here." "I'm not." "You're not just a student," Rex interrupted, his voice low but filled with certainty. "I can see it in your eyes. I've seen that look before. The look of someone who's been through real battles, who's had to make decisions no one should ever have to make." Sarah froze. It was as though he had read her soul, and all of a sudden, her carefully constructed mask felt fragile, like it might crack at any moment. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me." Rex stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know you better than you think. You think I don't know. You think I don't see the way you move, the way you think, how you calculate every step. You're not just a student, Sarah. You're hiding something. Something big." Sarah's mind spun. She could feel the walls closing in around her. Rex was too close, and she couldn't afford to lose control. Her military training, the same instincts that had once made her a leader, were now threatening to burst forth, but she knew she couldn't give in. Not here. Not now. "Rex, please," she said, her voice shaking with the effort to remain calm. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through." Rex's expression softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly. "I know you're running from something. From someone, maybe. And I know you're not the weak human everyone thinks you are." Sarah felt a rush of emotions flooding her. Fear, anger, frustration. It took everything in her not to lash out, not to let her true self be exposed. But before she could say anything more, the door to the lab suddenly swung open. Uni stepped inside, her silver eyes scanning the room. "Is everything okay?" Uni asked, her tone casual, but there was an edge to her voice that told Sarah she knew something was off. Rex glanced at Uni, his face hardening. "Everything's fine," he said coldly. "We were just talking." Uni didn't seem convinced. "Right," she said, her voice not quite matching the calm expression on her face. "Well, we've got a project to finish, so maybe we should focus on that." Sarah gave Yumi a grateful glance as the tension in the room shifted. Rex stood there for a moment longer, his eyes flicking between them both, as though deciding whether to press further. But after a long pause, he finally turned and walked out, leaving the two girls alone in the lab. The moment the door closed behind him, Sarah let out the breath she had been holding. "That was too close," she murmured, her heart still pounding in her chest. Uni stepped closer, her expression sympathetic. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but I could feel the tension in here." "Rex, he's getting too close, Sarah. I can see it. He's not going to stop until he finds out what you're hiding." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the truth bearing down on her. "I know, but I can't let him know. I can't let anyone know who I really am. If they find out, everything will be ruined." Uni studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You don't have to do this alone. You've been carrying this burden for too long. I know it's not easy, but maybe it's time you shared the truth. Not just with Rex, but with everyone. Maybe that's the only way to truly move forward." Sarah shook her head, the fear in her eyes impossible to hide. "I can't. If they know, I'll be a target. I'll never be able to live the life I want. It's too dangerous." Uni placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes, the truth is the only way to free yourself, Sarah. You can't keep running from it forever." The breaking point. The next few days were a blur of tension. Every conversation with Rex seemed to be a thinly veiled confrontation, each one pushing Sarah closer to the edge. But it wasn't just Rex's suspicion that was weighing on her. It was the mounting pressure to keep up the charade, to continue pretending to be someone she wasn't. In her quieter moments, when she allowed herself to think, Sarah found herself questioning everything. Had she made the right choice in leaving the military? Was hiding her past truly the best thing for her, or was it holding her back? That night, as Sarah sat alone in her dorm room, the weight of the situation seemed unbearable. She could hear the voices of her past, the soldiers who had followed her, the commanders who had trusted her. She could hear the sound of her own voice, commanding the troops, leading the charge. "I wanted peace," she whispered to herself, the words barely audible in the silence of the room. But what if peace isn't possible? What if I can't outrun my past forever? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she stood up, wondering who it could be. When she opened it, Uni was standing there again, her silver eyes serious. "We need to talk," Uni said quietly.